Hello everybody and welcome to our new lesson, which is the social movements. It's gonna be in chapter 16, section 2. So let's start. Of course, the first item we should mention in this lesson will be the definition. What's a social movement? A social movement is a long-term conscious effort to promote or to prevent a social change. And here comes a second term. Social change. What's a social change? A social change will be alterations in various aspects of society over the time. So, the goal of any social movement will be simply change in the society. Of course, there are some terms, some features, some characteristics of a social movement. These conditions must be applied in order to use the term a social movement. Of course, the first one is logical a little bit. It's long lasting. So it's not a short term social incident or social event. Highly structured organization with formally recognized leaders. Of course, it's a specific structure. We have leaders, we have spokesmen, we have media coverage, so it's organization. And the leaders are well known. Deliberate attempt to institute or block societal change. So you want to change, you want to block a certain social event in the society. Can attract memberships in the millions, of course, with the help of the media coverage. According to sociology, we have four types of social movements, and we're gonna see these four different types of the social movements in the next slide. The first type of the social movements will be the reactionary movements. The reactionary movements from its name. Their goal is simply to reverse current social trends. So they wanna go back in time a little bit to stop this social trend. Members are suspicious, often hostile towards social change, and they often use violence to support their movement type. يبقى maybe for example we have a social trend. The people who are involved in the reactionary movement see these social trends as a threat to the social stability. So they wanna change it. Of course, they will use violence. And of course, يعني a group of people who had supported this idea, and they will announce it to the public. And here is the danger. Of course, يعني any change in the society is happened by the dominant group. So the dominant group will start to see this specific group as a threat to its stability. So they will start to, or they will initiate an end to this movement at the very beginning to end this problem. طيب, not all the movements will stop at this point. Some of them will pass. طيب, after passing, they will turn to be a conservative movement. The conservative movements, their goal is to protect what they see as the society's prevailing values from changes they consider to be a threat to the societal values. يعني, for example, if a group of people will see some change in the society, this change will make a social change. Of course, يعني after a period of time, it will cause a social change. So this group of people will simply try to protect the social values from the threat that happened due to the social change. The third type of the social movements is the revisionary movements. From its name, revisionary movements, their goal is to improve or to revise some part of the society through a social change. They used to focus on only a single item, not to a problem with a lot of items, but they usually focus on a single item they wanna improve or revise, and usually this movement comes after any social change. So we can say that the revisionary movement simply accepted the social change. Then they want to enhance a specific item or to improve a specific item of it. So they will simply use the legal channels in order to start some kind of a negotiation between the dominant group and their movement. The last type of the social movements will be the revolutionary ones. The revolutionary ones, from its name, their ultimate goal is simply a complete and a whole radical change of the existing social structure. They always used violence in order to promote their actions. يبقى for the usage of violence, the reactionary and the revolutionary always used violence to promote their actions. يبقى the four types of the social movements are the reactionary, the conservative, the revisionary, and the last one, the revolutionary movements. طيب. What about the life cycle of the social movements from the beginning to the end? The first step in the life cycle of the social movements will be agitation. The agitation is simply the announcement of the social movements, emerge out of the belief that a problem exists and that solutions need to be found. يبقى a small group of people will start to gather themselves and they had a common belief that there is a problem and this problem must be raised to the public awareness. So their aim at the very beginning is simply to raise, to address the public awareness. Of course, once they reach the stage of the public awareness, usually this movement will come to an end because simply the dominant group will not leave it. So the dominant group will hear something about this movement, so they will try to end it at the very beginning. Those who are able to move, and I'm talking here about the movements, to the next stage, will come to the stage of legitimation. Legitimation is simply the movement here finds some kind of support, maybe from the public or from other figures. It becomes more respectable. Leaders are seen as spokespeople of a just case. يبقى the small group of people are now leaders. And the media will simply try to give them some attention at this point of the social movements. Of course, by the media coverage, they will gain millions of supporters at the same time. The third stage or the third phase of the social movement's life cycle will be procratization. Procratization is simply appears when the organizational structure of the movement becomes more formal. And by formal, I mean they have a leader and they have some assistants for the leader. Then they will try to get some financial support. There is a spokesman for the movement and there are a lot of committees for this movement. But usually at this period, or at the third stage of the life cycle of the social movements, usually the supporters will leave this social movement at this period of time, because simply the leaders and the small group of people who had already established this social movement from the very beginning, they will be busy arranging their office, arranging their committees, who will talk to the people, who is responsible for the media coverage, who is responsible for the financial issues. So the members will simply some kind leave or neglect or forget the original goals of such a movement. So the supporters usually start to leave this movement at this stage or at this phase of the life cycle. The last stage or the last phase of the life cycle will be the institutionalization. The institutionalization is simply the final stage, occurs when the movement has become an established part of the society. So the social movement now gains its own acceptance. It's a norm within the society. But simply they will start to be concerned with the resources a little bit. They will start to be busy with the financial support, and there will be some kind of changes within the movement itself. Maybe the leaders will be changed, or maybe there will be a lot of committees need to be changed, but the members will simply start to see this need of change as an extra thing, and the membership simply start to decrease a little bit. And I'm talking here about the membership, but I mean the supporters of the social movements. You have 4 stages of the life cycle. It's agitation, legitimation, bureaucratization, and the institutionalization. 4 stages. I would like to summarize the types of the social movements and the life cycle of it. So, the social movements type are reactionary, which their main goal is simply to reverse the current social trends. They want to change something in the society. They want to go back in history and stop this social trend. The conservative, from its name, their aim is simply to protect the societal values. The revisionary, they simply accept the social change and they accept it as a norm. Then they want to enhance or revise a specific item of it. The revolutionary, their goal is simply a radical change. They want a complete change in the social structure. So these are the 4 main social movements types. For the life cycle, we have 4 stages. We have the agitation, legitimation, bureaucratization, and the institutionalization. Here we have an example for the life cycle of social movements. We have here the labor movements which happened over there in the States. At the first stage, the agitation. So they noticed some kind of low payment and harsh working conditions. Type. They will go to here is the social problem. So a group of people will start to gather themselves in order to address the public. They will go to the next stage, legitimation. They simply received official governmental recognition for this labor movement. So now it's gained the labor movement gain its own acceptance within the society. They will go to the third stage, bureaucratization. They firmly established and they are powerful organizations nowadays. The fourth stage, institutionalization. Some members feel that the labor unions simply are no longer serve their needs and they begin to leave. The membership will start to decrease. طيب. The last item in our lesson will be, why do we have social movements in the society? Why do we have such kind of movements that promote social change? In fact, in order to answer this question, we have two different points of views. We have a psychological point of view and a sociological one. According to psychology, they had said that people who are responsible for promoting social movements are usually have some kind of personality problems, disturb people. From their own point of view, or this theory is called the relative deprivation theory. From their own point of view, they said that the movements arise when a group of people feel economically or socially deprived compared to what other groups have. In fact, the promoter for this theory was Karl Marx, and he had an example. The example says, if any worker live in a small house, he is satisfied. He's satisfied living in a small house as long as, with only one condition, as long as all of his neighbors live in small houses. So the worker had no problem. All of the workers are the same. But the worker has no problem to live in a small house as long as all of his neighbors live in a small house. But if a place arises in the neighborhood with bigger houses, not small ones anymore, the worker will not be satisfied because he wants a piece of the cake. Why I'm not living in such a bigger place? Why I'm living in a small one? Because simply people seek things that others have and they do not. Inequality in the society. Here is the problem. So it's related to the satisfaction factor. This is the relative deprivation theory. What about the sociological perspective? From a sociological perspective, they see that the problem is simply with the resources, the mobility of the resources mobilization theory. They had said that without a resource, the social movement cannot be established. What do I mean by resources? I simply mean, in order to establish a social movement, of course, number one, you need a problem. You need a social problem. Number two, you need a body of supporters. You need a group of people who support this idea. And of course, they need a lot of financial resources. Why do you think they need financial resources? When we want to promote a social change, we want to discuss a problem to the public awareness. Why do we need resources? Of course, they need the resources to, let's say, to rent some meeting rooms, for example, in order to meet together and discuss the problem. They need some kind of banners or brochures to promote their idea, to raise the public awareness. They wanna, for example, hire some lawyers in order, of course, some of them will be arrested because they are against the dominant group. For the legal issues, they wanna hire some lawyers. And of course, for the media coverage, they need the money. The most important factor in the resource mobilization theory will be the financial resources. But on the other hand, some sociologists say that both theories are accurate descriptions. يبقى both of them are correct. يعني by telling you that there are two explanations, two theories for the social movements, I do not mean that one of them is wrong and the other one is correct. Both of them are correct, but every single one is simply explaining it from his own perspective. So, for the explanation of the social movements, the existence of the social movements, we have a psychological perspective and the sociological one. We have the relative deprivation theory and the resource mobilization theory. And by these two theories, our lesson comes to an end. And as usual, let's have some questions as a reminder for what we have already discussed in the lesson. So, the first question says, how do the four types of social movements differ in terms of the level of social change they seek? So here, I need the four types of the social movements. What are them? So the first one will be the reactionary movement. The reactionary, its aim or its goal is simply to reverse current social trend. They want to go back in time and stop this social change. The conservative. The conservative, their aim is to protect what is seen as a societal threat. The revisionary movement is simply they want to enhance or they want to revise a specific item, not a whole. The revolutionary movement is simply to cause total and radical change for the usage of violence. The revolutionary and the reactionary often use violence. What are the stages in the life cycle of the social movements? The four stages. The first one, agitation, legitimation, bureaucratization, and the last one, institutionalization. What are the two major sociological theories on the development of social movements? We have two theories. We have the relative deprivation theory and the resource mobilization theory. The relative deprivation theory, it's related to psychology. The social movements arise when large numbers of people feel economically or socially deprived of something. The resource mobilization theory, the resources including a body of supporters, financial resources, and access to the media are necessary for a successful social movement. Even here, they are not satisfied, but here they must have some resources. By resources, I mean body of supporters, financial resources, and access to the media. Thank you guys, until we meet again next week. Bye bye.